Hello, Frizzle fanatics! It is time for my best books of 2023. And today I'm going to try to convince you to pick up my top 10. So I'm going to be starting with rank 10, working my way up to my best book of 2023. Jumping into rank number 10 is Revenant Prince. This is book 2 in a series that started with Tethered Spirits. That book revolves around this immortal man, and every time he dies, he just like revivifies and comes back alive the next day, but he comes back with no memories. So he doesn't know how long he's been alive, he doesn't know how this got started, but he is sure sick of being an amnesiac, so he's on a quest to try to undo whatever this is. And then we're also following an antagonist who's after him to try to find the secret of his immortality because they want it for themselves and their loved ones. And I loved book 1, and then I read book 2 this year, and it's even better. At the end of book 1, our characters suffered a lot of different losses, both the heroes and the villains, and book 2 is a lot of exploring all those losses in such intriguing ways. This book also has a new facet and take on this reoccurring amnesia problem, which is fascinating and completely hooked me. Now, something to know about me is I am a go to bed on time kind of girl. I do not stay up late reading things. Except this book, because it just hooked me and I had to stay up all night reading it because it was even better than sleep, which I treasure so much. This book might be rank 10 on this list, but it's also the only one that I like sacrificed sleep over, so that tells you how hooked I was. It's entirely addicting because it's plotted so well, because every single one of the characters, as we're following a bunch of different narrators, are given things to do and interesting and complex emotional battles. This being a book 2 and like the middle of the series, I was worried going into it that it would fall into like middle book syndrome, which is where the middle book isn't really given enough plot and things to do, but this one completely circumvented that problem, and I felt like this was so jam-packed with important events, felt necessary to the story on every page. Additionally, this book is fun with the emotional friendships that are formed. And I love that this book has a strong presence of friendship as different characters come together. They give each other emotional support that leads to emotional growth, and that's always so satisfying to see this found family assembling. I gave Revenant Prince 5 stars. I highly recommend it and the first book in the series, Tethered Spirits. Rank 9 is the Soulmate Equation. And this has the distinction of being the only true romance on this list. Lots of my favorite books have romance subplots, but this one, it's the main plot. Where in this book, there's a company where you can submit to your DNA to them, and then they match you based on DNA with potential romantic partners. And our protagonist, Jess, submits her DNA to this company, and she gets back an incredibly high match with the CEO of the company. And the company is looking for some good publicity, so they offer to pay her to fake date the CEO so that they can make some articles about like, look, even our CEO found love. And there were a lot of things that I was obsessed with in this book. It's a very solid contemporary romance book, but beyond that, I loved how it dealt with its premise here. It really took the time to explore what it meant to our heroine and our hero that they matched with someone and that their DNA says that they're soulmates. It adds an extra layer of depth to the fake dating situation that they're in. In a normal fake dating situation, there's already the level of fakeness of, is what my partner is doing coming out of real feelings or just coming out for the cameras? And then this is another layer of that is this excitement I'm feeling about this relationship because I have the expectations that it's going to be a soulmate based on this app, based on what the science says, or is what I'm feeling really coming from inside? Is it something that I can trust? And I also love that our characters here are math nerds. CEO of the science company, big science nerd, and our protagonist is a statistician, and it gives her room to be a statistician. Like, there's plot turns and events that happen just because she number crunches, and she's always processing the world through that lens of looking at it mathematically. I see so often books that are saying like, yeah, these characters are in STEM, but then they don't feel like they're in STEM because the author doesn't know how to write that and just gives them bad technobabble. But this book, it really felt like our protagonists were scientists and mathematicians and cared a lot about the data and the integrity of that and the experimental procedure of everything. One of the things that really propelled this book from just a romance that I loved to a romance that I was obsessed with and made the top 10 books of the year is the way that it handled its third act conflict. Oftentimes romance novels will have a conflict in the third act which breaks up the couple that just got together in act 2 so that they can get back together again in act 3, and it's sometimes really annoying because it feels very contrived. They just got together, why are they breaking up already? But in this book, the breakup was first surprising and earned, and I felt like was resolved in a way that made me feel even better about the romance after the fact. So I gave the Soulmate Equation 5 stars. In rank 8 is the Renegades trilogy. When I originally read these books, I gave them all 4 stars. And then looking back on them, I upgraded them all to 5 because the more that I read in the series and how the books supported all of each other, just upgraded them all to 5 stars because it's like perfection. This is a novel about a post-apocalyptic world where superheroes saved the world and then took over. Now they are the government in charge. And one of our protagonists is the son of some of those superheroes. So he's grown up in this world where he is in a position of power, and he's been taught that the superheroes are the best things in the world and the ultimate good, and he's very passionate about being a hero. Then on the other side of the coin, we have the super villains that were defeated by those heroes. And we are following a girl whose parental figures are those villains. She's been raised by the villains, and she's been raised to think that the superheroes are the worst things that's ever happened to the world. They're abusing their power, they're not a good government structure, and they should be murdered. So that's her goal in life. And as they come into each other's orbits, they start to form some interesting connections. They form a romance connection, which is full of angst all the way through. Like they're literal nemeses, and yet also in love. And the drama is always right there and so fun. But on top of that, they're also forming this relationship of ideology in conflict and coming together. And where he's seeing that the heroes aren't always the best, and actually maybe the system does need to get taken down. And she's seeing that like maybe murder isn't always the answer and the heroes are actually doing some good things for the city. And I think that's what I'm really obsessed with in this book, is their rich internal conflicts as they're coming in contact with new ideologies and trying to fit it into their own brain. It takes them bonding with each other and helping each other through it to come to middle ground that is more stable for both of them. This book is wrestling with so much ideology of like who is a real hero and villain and what is the right way to do a government. When is violence necessary and when is restraint necessary? And on top of it, a beautiful love story with rich, earned conflict at the heart of it. And one of the best things is this series ending. It caught me off guard, it surprised me, and yet it was exactly the ending that the series needed to answer all of its thematic questions in such a satisfying way. Every page of these books, perfect. I loved them so much. I gave Renegades 5 stars. Rank 7 goes to The Witchwood Knot. This book takes place in Victorian England with magic, and we are following Winnie, and she has been hired on as a governess to this manor house. And she's also been hired on kind of as a ghost slash fae exterminator because the manor is haunted and cursed and the situation isn't exactly stable. And she has some magic and some dealings with fae in the past, so she thinks that she can probably handle it. And she shows up and there's conflict right from the get-go because there's a mysterious butler who definitely doesn't want her there. And this is Mr. Quincy. But this mysterious butler also wants to break the curse. So as they start to work together to work through this, they find that they have a lot more in common than they expected. Even though he's kind of evil and despicable and will do anything, won't even blink at murder to get what he wants, he and Winnie are still on the same side and they make a fantastic team. And as they work together more to unravel the knot of this manor house, they gain a respect for each other, which slowly blossoms into a romance. They love the spookiest parts of each other and it's so perfect! I love how this book balances very contrasting tones. Like, this book is gothic and dark, but it's also romantic and wholesome. It's very mysterious and fairy tale vibes, and yet it's also easy to follow and has a very structured plot. It leans into the Victorian era and the gothicness of it all, but it doesn't lean so hard into atmospheric, plotless weirdness that those kind of books tend to favor. It was a delight on every page, with the central conflict of solving the curse of this manor house and also the romance alongside of it, and I loved both. I gave The Witchwood Knot 5 stars. Rank 6 is Paladin of Souls. This is a spin-off book to The Curse of Chalion, which I read earlier in the year. And this book, one of the things I love about it is that it takes place in kind of the aftermath of that one, where we are following Queen Ista, who was a side character in Curse of Chalion. And in that book, she was cursed, but by the end of the book, she isn't cursed any longer. And then this book is her exploring her new non-cursed life. So at this point, she hasn't been involved in politics for decades. She is the mother of the ruling queen, and the people of her court don't expect her to do anything because she's been cursed for decades, and she's just been in the background, side character, not important in any way. Maybe she's crazy. We can't trust her to do anything. And so that's still the mindset that no one expects her to do anything but rest and be chill. But she doesn't really want to be chill. She doesn't want to be coddled and taken care of in this castle, she wants an adventure. So she manufactures herself a holy pilgrimage that no one can object to and sets out on the road. And while she's on the road, she runs into new difficulties because this fantasy world has some meddlesome gods, and in her past she got meddled with by the gods, and that kind of led to her terrible cursed situation. So she's not feeling too charitable towards the gods. She wants nothing to do with any of them. But as she's out here on her journey claiming her own autonomy, the gods are doing some meddling and giving her more and more responsibility. Responsibility that she doesn't want, but responsibility that she's slowly taking on because she's more ready for it as she goes through the character development of finding her autonomy. She wants to be in charge of herself and nothing else. But the options that she's continually presented in this book is either in charge of nothing or in charge of like everything, and then she has to juggle that and find her balance. The conflict in this book is between what her minders at the palace want for her, what she wants for herself, and what the gods need and require of her, and whose demands she really wants to satisfy, and where can she find lasting happiness. And this book surprised me over and over again where it went. It's very meandering in its plot that way, but in the most delightful way, where every twist and step is unveiling this new mini-adventure. It's slow-paced, and Ista's character journey really resonated with me. It's the story of a middle-aged woman who was a side character claiming her main character energy. And I gave it 5 stars. Rank 5 is System Collapse, the 7th book of the Murderbot Diary series. And I have given every single book in this series 5 stars, and I have thorough videos mostly nitpicking most of this series because I've got that relationship with the books where they're like so bingeable and I love them and I'm always so excited to read them and reread them and reread them, and it's like my comfort series. And also I have a lot of things in these books that I'm nitpicking and not quite enjoying, but I feel like this one addressed a lot of those concerns, and I'm left even more happy with this one than I am with the previous books in the series. The Murderbot Diaries books are a sci-fi series about finding your identity and building a network of friends. We're following a robot who has broken out of the role that society has assigned it and is trying to build a new life. But it doesn't quite know what it wants that new life to be, so a lot of these books are exploring different parts of that while also running into trouble that it has to punch its way out of. And throughout the series, as it runs into new fearsome villains, it gains better punching skills, and as it runs into more emotional conflicts and people it wants to befriend, it gains more social skills. And this installment of the series focused a lot more on the social skills, where instead of the main conflict being a punchable thing and the side conflict being an emotional social skills thing, it flip-flopped that, where the main conflict was more the social skills and the sub-conflict was the punching problem. And I really love the growth that it gave our protagonist. I highly recommend the whole series. They are all incredibly bingeable, short, usually novella-length books about fun, sarcastic robots and the misadventures it gets into. I gave System Collapse 5 stars. Rank 4 is the DFZ series. I read 3 books in this extended universe series this year and gave them all 5 stars. So let's talk about my favorite one, which is By a Silver Thread. This is an urban fantasy world where we've got the real world and we also have magic and we also have cyberpunk elements. There are 3 sub-series in this world and I recommend them all. By a Silver Thread is the start of a new series following a girl named Lola, but Lola isn't a regular girl. In this world, the Fae occasionally steal away human children. And then in the place of the human child, they leave a changeling, which is a bundle of magic designed to look like a child that lasts for a few years. And Lola is one of these changeling bundles of magic. And when she is about to expire as a little kid, an evil blood magician comes and saves her. So his dark magic is the only thing keeping her alive, and all she has to do in return is become his henchman. So she spent like her entire life being his henchman, and she hates it. And then at the beginning of the story, he goes missing, which turns into a big problem because there goes her supply of the magic keeping her alive, and the countdown has begun. And then as she's searching for him, she has to contend with a lot of the enemies he has as an evil magician and find some plots that might be too big for her to handle. And I think what I love most about this story is the way that the character of Lola is constructed, because she is like made of internal conflicts, where her day job is being this evil henchman and destroying people's lives, But she really just wants to be a nice person. That she wants to be honest and make honest emotional connections with people, but she kind of needs to emotionally manipulate people to get what she wants and to keep her own situation stable. So she's doing that all the time. She wants her independence, and in this book she suddenly has it, and it turns out it means her doom and she doesn't quite know what to do with it. She both feels naive and soft, and cutthroat and vicious. She never wants to hurt someone, but she's also willing to do whatever it takes to get what she wants. And she doesn't fit into any of the regular protagonist archetypes. She has awesome magical abilities to shapeshift and make all of these fun things, but they end up being more of a hindrance than a help in most parts of the story as her magic is disintegrating. The mystery and action plot was very good. I was on the edge of my seat, full of theories and surprised at many of the plot twists. And to top it all off, there's a wonderful romance plot that I was shipping all the way. I gave By a Silver Thread 5 stars. Rank 3 is the Vorkosigan Saga. I read most of this series last year and finished it up this year, and of the ones I read in 2023, I gave 4 of them 5 stars. And my favorite of those is Ethan of Athos. So the planet of Athos is pretty weird. It's founded on the idea that women are the source of all evil, and so it's a man-only planet. And it's been running for a couple hundred years, manufacturing test tube babies. The problem is that they are running out of eggs in order to make babies. So Ethan, born and raised on Athos, is the one tasked with going out into the wider galaxy to find some more ovarian cultures so the planet can keep on going. And that's a weird setup, right? And you can imagine that a planet founded on such misogynistic ideas would produce hateful men. But the people on the planet no longer hate women. They just incredibly fear them. So here's Ethan going out into the wider galaxy to confront his greatest fear, females. And he is so earnest and kind and out of his depth and brave despite it. The main conflict of this book is his irrational fear of women and the outside world in general, and the resolution comes as he gains confidence and female friends. And then added in is also a plot about interplanetary espionage that he accidentally gets tangled in, which is quite exciting and involves spies and battles to the death. And all through it, he's just trying to claim an understanding of the world and find his place in it. This book is absolutely delightful all the way through. I love its goofy premise and I love what it does with it, really exploring what this culture could be like and how an earnest man from that culture would interact with the wider world. And though this book is part of this wider universe of Vorkosigan Saga books, it is a standalone and you can read it right now if you want. I gave Ethan of Athos 5 stars. And I loved it so much that I think if it was just this book, it would have gotten higher on the list, but other books in this Vorkosigan Saga folder I would rank a little lower on this 5-star list, so it equals out to rank 3. Rank 2 is A Study in Drowning. This is the story of a woman named Effie, who's a university student in 1930s fantasy version Wales. And she's obsessed with this novel about a girl who outsmarts and defeats the fairy king. And the reason that she loves this novel so much is that she hallucinates the fairy king on a semi-regular basis coming to attack her. And so this novel is the only thing that gives her solace and makes her feel sane. And she gets the opportunity to do this school project at the manor house of the author of this novel, who died a while ago, but she still jumps at the chance to go to his estate because she doesn't quite like the university environment because she's the only woman there and sexism is rampant. So she's really excited to go to the country house to visit this manor estate, and then when she gets there, it's not as great as she imagined because the fairy king is lurking around this countryside cliffs, and there's a rival student there also staying at the manor who she does not get along with despite how hot he is. And the writing of this book is absolutely beautiful. It's poetic, it's gripping, and I loved it. I also loved how a lot of the conflict of this book comes with Effie being a somewhat unreliable narrator. That she's never quite sure what's real and what's her hallucinations, and you, the reader, are never quite sure what's real. Do you believe her? Do the people around her believe her? And does she believe in herself? And this book really explores all of that and the power that comes from believing in yourself or having other people believe in you. Even if your story and your truth is wildly fantastical or dark and grim. At its center, I think I would describe this as a coming-of-age novel, but it's also a gothic dark academia. It's also a romance, it's also a mystery, and it's also a little bit of a horror novel. And it's got a whole lot of soul-searching. I'm obsessed with this novel. It's so emotional and raw and mysterious, and I love it. And despite all the dark moments, it pulls through with a happy ending. I gave A Study in Drowning 5 stars. And now a few honorable mentions, other favorites of the year that didn't quite make it into the top 10. The Hexologist for its delightful vocabulary setting and cute dynamic duo of a married couple. Warrior Born for its exquisite pacing and absolutely excellent character internal conflict. Vespertine for its inventive premise and fun protagonist sidekick dynamic. Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons for being a ray of sunshine in a bleak stretch of books and so cute and heartfelt. And the Star Nomad series for having an achingly sweet, slow burn romance intermixed with a fun sci-fi plot. And then, my favorite book of the year is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries. It took me so long to pick this book up because every review of it I heard, I was like, that doesn't sound like an exciting book. So I'm going to attempt to explain how awesome this book is, but I think I might fail because it just sounds really boring. Emily Wilde is a professor of fairies in turn-of-the-century alternate reality England, and she has a passion project which is making an encyclopedia of all the different types of fairies, and she's missing one critical entry, so she's going out on a quest to study these fairies in the field. And this book is told entirely through her journal, and it's done so well. It is the voice of Emily that carries this book, that makes it or breaks it. Because if you don't like her voice, you're gonna hate this book. And there are many negative reviews of this book for that very reason, but if you connect with her voice and you love it, welcome to the club. It's my favorite book of the year. One of the things that makes her voice a little difficult to connect to is that Emily is very autistic coded, and she's not super expressive of her emotions in her journal. She's not always likable in her journal. She's so emotionally resilient and so competent and so fun to follow in so many ways as she just absolutely slays in her research, but then she gets into a social situation she doesn't know how to handle it, and then you either get really annoyed with her and you're not having a good time with the book, or you love her even more and want to hug her and comfort her and help her through this hard time. This book is often described as cozy fantasy, and it is incredibly cozy with that journal writing, with a lot of details on the fairy lore, and with not being super plot heavy. But I would describe it as more intellectually cozy than the traditional cozy fantasy of emotionally cozy. There's a lot of big words in this book. There's a lot of fairy lore. It gives you a lot of fun intellectual puzzles. And I think one of those is you have to read between the lines to see a lot of what Emily is thinking and feeling and the romance that's going on in the background here. Because after she is set off on her big quest, who shows up but her devastatingly handsome colleague, Professor Bamblebee. And he's obviously obsessed with her. He's chased her across the world, and he is her foil in practically every way. He is incredibly good at people, but he's not so good at the research part that she excels with. So she welcomes his help on this expedition because she does need some more people skills and to find funding and present her research. And one of the reasons that it feels so intellectually cozy is that a lot of the conflicts are kind of hidden in the background and you have to go digging for them. There's a conflict between what Emily thinks she is, which is like the perfect researcher, and her crippling hubris, which she doesn't quite admit on the page. She's not great at emotional introspection, but the narration gives you enough clues that you can figure out what she's feeling even if she doesn't outright say it and admit it in her journal. And hidden in the pages of this journal is so much internal conflict. Hidden in between the lines here is a beautiful blossoming romance. And I loved following this character so much for all of those reasons. I also had the pleasure of reading the sequel this year, and I liked it even better than book 1. And I would highly recommend the Emily Wilde books for people who like intellectually cozy books, the pleasure of reading between the lines to find a brilliant romance, and very character-focused narratives that only have a little bit of a plot engine to keep it going on the side. I gave Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries 5 stars, and it's my best book of 2023. If you liked this video, I think you'll love watching this one next.